After making initial tutorials on converting music to the A432 Hz scale, there have been various comments on and off from people that have a large collection of music in their library, and they wanted to know what can they do. How can they convert their whole entire library to 432, since doing it one by one, the way I was showing in my tutorials, it's a pretty time-consuming task. So in this tutorial, I'll show you how to do batch conversion in Audacity. There is actually a way to do it, and I'll show you a step-by-step way to do it, so that you can basically just open up your files, run this batch, and I do suggest to leave it overnight or so, because it will take some time. But this way it's an automated process, and you don't have to convert each song one by one. So let me show you how to do it. Okay, so let's start doing our batch conversion. I already have Audacity open here. Let's go to File, Edit Chains, and this is what batch conversion is called in Audacity. And here you can see there's already a default chain that's created with Audacity. I'll give you a fast rundown of the way it works. You see this is the number of processes, the first, second, and third sequence in the process. And what this conversion does, called MP3 conversion, is that it opens a MP3 track, it normalizes it, and then exports it. So basically, if you have a library of a bunch of tracks that have that are of various sound levels, and you know when you're playing a track after a track, you don't want to raise volume, then lower volume, then raise volume once again. So what this chain was created for was to normalize the sound levels of all your tracks, so that you don't have to play with volume anymore, and you can just listen to them. So we're going to create our own chain right now. Let's click on Add, and let's call it Converting from 440 Hz to 432 Hz. Before moving on with this chain conversion, I want to emphasize one important point. When you're doing a batch conversion, it's already assumed that there's a specific similarity between the files that you're going to be inputting. Since we're creating a batch conversion that changes the tuning of each individual track, it's already assumed that each individual track is in the same input frequency. In this case, we're assuming that each track is in the 440 Hz frequency. So when you're converting your library, please make sure that every single track that you're going to be adding to this batch is already in 440 Hz, or whatever frequency you're going to be setting this batch to be in. Because you know, if your input tracks, if some tracks are in a different frequency, then if we're going to put in a ratio that only works for 440 to 432, those tracks that are in a different input frequency are not going to be converted to 432. So please keep that in mind before adding these files to the batch. So let's start adding these files. Let's start creating our chain. We're going to click on Insert button here. And let's first find that module that actually changes the pitch, therefore changes the frequency of the tuning, the scale frequency. And this is here it is, the time scale. We're going to double click on it, and so that the parameters appear here. And then we're going to click on the Edit Parameters button. And now we see the already familiar sliding time scale pitch shift module window. Now we're just going to input our settings. As you see that I already have my settings input here. And once again, I want to go over the actual percentage change that's used. As I've told before, that I do use the negative 1.776 when I do the conversion. If you want to be exactly right on 432, then you can do the negative 1.818. However, there's really no difference between negative 1.776 and negative 1.818. And what I mean by there is really no difference, there's really no audible difference. Because whether you use one or the other, you still fall within the 432 Hz range. So please feel free to use any one. There's really no confusion about it. There's no right or wrong between this or the other. Even if you use negative 1.778 or negative 1.790, they all fall within the range. But if you want to be exact, you want to be specific, you can use this negative 1.818 because that's the most standard one that you'll find, and that's also the one that comes out when you use the formula for conversion from 440 to 432. If you use the formula that's being displayed right now on the screen, using that formula, you will get this negative 1.818. So feel free to use either one. They will both work. So in this case, well, let's just stick with this one, negative 1.818. And we're going to click on OK. And we're going to click on OK one more time. And as you see, our first parameter has been already created. Now let's create our second parameter. And in our second parameter, what we're going to do is we're going to normalize the track after the tuning frequency has been changed. We're going to click on Normalize, double click on it, click on Edit Parameters, and this is already set to what we want it to be, so we're just going to click on OK here, and we'll click on OK. Now the point of this is that this is something that I've noticed before, is whenever you change using this module, and also same thing in Audition, by the way, whenever you do a pitch shift or change the frequency of a track, the audio levels increase and they start peaking. So we want to make sure to normalize the track so there's no, not peaking, so they start clipping. So we want to make sure to normalize the track so there's no clipping after the conversion has completed. So this is why we're adding this as our second step, normalize. And after this, we're going to add our third step, and final step, which is simply export. We want to make sure to export the file that we converted. So we're going to click on Export MP3, double click on this, and we're going to click on OK. And once again, we're going to go through our chain of events. We convert it from 440 to 432. Then we normalize it. Then we export it. And this is what happens to every individual file that is run in this chain. So we'll click on OK. And now let's see this in action. We're going to go to File, Apply Chain. We're going to select our newly created chain, converting from 440 Hz to 432. And we're going to click on the Apply to Files button. When selecting files for processing, I created 4 test files, and these files are in 440 Hz. I already checked. So we're going to select them. Click on Open. And the process has started. Now, as I've already mentioned before, this process will take some time because you're doing a batch conversion on many files in your music library, and also you're doing a high quality method conversion, the sliding time scale pitch shift method. So I do suggest running this overnight, and depending on how many tracks you have, I've had some people email me telling me that they have a 40 gigabyte, that is a library of music files that they want to convert. This will take some time, and actually may take more than one night to do it. So depending on the size of your music library, you may even want to do several batches, because this also depends on your computer processing speed. So perhaps you may want to try out with doing maybe 30 or 20 files at once overnight and see how fast it does, and then you may want to do more or less. Okay, so now that our chain has completed, what has happened is that, and this is something that you'll notice, a file has been created called cleaned, and that file will be in the same directory where your original files were that you used for this batch processing. And when you double click on that file, inside it will be the tracks that were converted. This is what Audacity does by default. They create this folder called cleaned, and the files are going to be there. Okay, so this completes our batch conversion process. And a couple pointers that I wanted to make regarding this is that you may have a couple questions or a couple issues that you will come by when doing this, especially if you just freshly installed Audacity. And first of all, you may not have the MP3 exporting module. And this is because Audacity does not come with it by default. It needs to be added as a separate library. And to do this, basically, well, first of all, you want to check whether you have it or not. And let's first do this. Let's go to Audacity, Preferences. And in our libraries, if this is empty, if it doesn't say lame and this version number, then you don't have it installed, and this means you cannot export as MP3s. So you just need to click on this download button here. It will take you to a page where you can download this module, install it, restart Audacity, and then you'll be able to export as MP3s in order to complete this chain process, or even on an individual level. Second of all, the other question that you may have is, in what format is, or in what bit rate, rather, is the MP3 conversion is doing the process in? What's the bit rate of my output MP3 files? And to do this, to check on this, basically, it's using your default bit rate that you used to export your previous MP3 files in Audacity. If you haven't done that before, let's just do our first. Let's pretend that we just install Audacity for the first time, that we just also install this MP3 exporting module. So let's just open up our track. This is one of the tracks that we already used, chest track. And then let's say that we want to export it as an MP3. So we're going to go to File, Export, and in Format we're going to select MP3 files. We're going to click on Options here, and this is the bit rate that it exports for me, because this is the setting that I set it to, the highest MP3 bit rate possible. I clicked on Constant, selected 320 kilobits per second, selected Stereo, and then I clicked on OK. And this is basically what you can do as well. Just select whatever bit rate it is that you prefer, whatever bitrate mode that is in this level here, and then select your quality, preferred quality, click on OK, and this will be your preset from now on. Okay, so basically this should answer the two questions that I'm assuming that you may have after looking at this tutorial. And as always, if you have any other questions, please just let me know. You should be all set from now on to do these conversions without any problems, and this should take care of that questions that many of you had, which is how do I convert my whole entire library to the 432 Hz. All right. Thank you for your time, and take care.